Welcome to the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. I'm K.M. Weiland, and I am here to take you deep with story theory, writing techniques, and the incredible wisdom of story. I believe story is the greatest power on this earth, and that as writers, we carry the torch of wielding that power with responsibility, passion, and skill. There is no such thing as just a story. Today, it is my honor and my purpose to help you write your best story, astound the world, and maybe change your life. Hello and welcome. You are listening to Season 17, Episode 19. There's nothing quite like a scene that ends with a bang, or at least a purposeful beat that pulls readers deeper into the story. A well-crafted scene ending doesn't just wrap things up, it launches momentum into the next scene, it tightens your pacing, and deepens the emotional arc. Now, your scene might close in any number of ways, for everything from a victory to a setback or a plot twist to a moment of quiet revelation. Whatever the case, scene endings create the impression that, well, hopefully, carry readers into what comes next. Really, your writer's toolbox doesn't contain many tools more powerful than scene endings, yet they can easily be overlooked when it comes to tightening tension or strengthening overall story structure. Classic scene structure breaks scenes into two broad halves, scene or action and sequel or reaction. The scene half further breaks down into three primary pieces. Piece number one is goal, which drives the action and intent of the scene as the characters move towards something. Piece number two is conflict, which creates drama and complications by inserting obstacles that divert the smooth course of the character's progression. And piece number three is outcome, which shows the conclusion of the character's efforts and reveals new complications leading to the next scene's goal. Now, I have always emphasized the usefulness of two particular types of scene endings, the disaster or the no end scene ending, and the yes but disaster. But today I want to go deeper by breaking down 5 key types of scene endings: yes, yes but, no, no end, and no but, and exploring how choosing the right one can keep your story flowing and your readers hooked. So welcome to today's episode, the 5 types of scene endings every writer must master. So first of all, let's consider why we have scenes in our stories at all. Why not just one mad rush of action leading to the end? Now, although we could perhaps argue this a few different ways, the ultimate reason scenes are important in storytelling is the same reason any kind of structure is important. It creates and controls the pacing. And pacing, as I have shared before, is basically the writer's version of the cool Jedi trick of mind control. More than almost any other technique in fiction, pacing allows us to guide the audience's experience. And this is perhaps nowhere more true than of scene endings, which give audiences the opportunity to put the story down or keep going. If you convince them to keep going, that means they're enjoying themselves. And the more they're enjoying themselves, the more likely they will stay with it all the way to the end. So here are 2 ways to think about scene endings. Number 1, as the outcome that is taking place at the end of the scene structure, which we talked about a minute ago. And number 2, as any obvious break in the narrative, such as a chapter or commercial break, or even just the subtle division of a scene break on the page. Now, it's important to notice that the 2 may be the same, but that they don't have to be. A structural scene is defined by the pieces that make up its whole, scene and sequel with all their smaller parts, while chapters and scenes that are dictated by visual scene breaks on the page, they can be of whatever length is most useful to the pacing. So a structural scene may expand across many chapters, or a single chapter may contain multiple structural scenes. And if you want to dig deeper into this, you can check out the episode 7 questions you have about scenes versus chapters. But for our purposes today, we're mostly focusing on the outcome of a structural scene. Why? Because these moments move beyond simple hooks or tricks used to tease audiences. Importantly, structural scene outcomes are always important turning points that advance the plot. The only way the plot is ever advanced is by something changing in the narrative. That is, whatever scene goal the character just enacted cannot be enacted once again in exactly the same way. Something has changed. And this could be simply that the character learned how to try again in a better way, or it could be that a major setback or achievement was reached that significantly altered the goal itself. Now, it's also worthwhile to note that the idea of a scene goal does not necessarily insist that characters know exactly what they want and move toward it with single-minded focus. Sometimes the forward momentum implied by the idea of a goal is better recognized as simply an intent on the character's part. They may be moving in a particular direction, but they may also, depending on the needs and tone of the story, simply be leaning in a certain direction. Either way, what is most important is that this forward intent is met with some level of conflict. And here too, it's important to understand conflict in its broader sense. Conflict need not necessarily mean a confrontation or any hint of violence. That is, something so slight as a disagreement on one end of the spectrum, escalating into physical chaos on the other. Rather, conflict is best understood simply as something that impedes the scene's forward momentum. Conflict is an obstacle creating the further complications or consequences that eventually change the character's position within the narrative, thus changing the plot. This change of situation is what then leads into the end of the scene or the outcome, which can show up as several different possibilities. Each possibility will impact your story's pacing, flow, and function in different ways, which is why it's important to understand all of them, the consequences they create, and which is best suited to any particular scene ending in your story. So, what are the best types of scene endings in fiction? Some endings slam the door shut. Others crack it open. Some fling it off its hinges and send your characters stumbling into the next chapter. What matters most is that the scene's outcome matters. It creates consequence, change, and momentum. So let's break down the 5 primary types of scene endings and explore how each one functions in your narrative and why some are stronger choices than others. Scene ending type number 1, yes, in which characters get what they want. So this one's straightforward. Characters set out to achieve a goal in the scene, and they succeed. Yay! Now, sometimes yes endings can be deeply satisfying. However, they must be used with caution and awareness as they risk deflating tension. Usually, ultimate success is reserved only for the end of the story, and this is for the simple reason that once the character has definitively succeeded or failed to reach the overall story goal, the plot is over. If your character's progress toward that ultimate goal is left unimpeded for too long, the plot will quickly run its course. Of perhaps even greater concern is that yes, scene endings don't always generate new questions or consequences for the characters to explore in subsequent scenes. Usually, yes, scene endings are most appropriate later in the plot when you're wanting to show characters getting closer to achieving their final success. Yes, scene endings can also be used for catharsis late in the story to relieve some of the tension you may have built, such as when romantic couples finally get together in a positive and love-affirming way, even if their struggles in the main plot haven't yet been fully resolved. Now, ironically, yes, scene endings can be more appropriate in negative change arc stories than in positive change arc stories. And this is because when a character is headed for a bad end, the successes achieved on the scene level ultimately lead to greater accumulated consequences down the line. For example, in The Great Gatsby, when Gatsby finally reunites with Daisy at Nick's house, he achieves his goal of finally meeting with her. The scene ends with Gatsby glowing in his long-awaited triumph. No real conflict derails the scene goal, and Gatsby doesn't have to pay any immediate price. He gets exactly what he wants, and in that moment, it feels like success. Scene ending type 2, no, in which characters are shut down. So by contrast, in a no ending, characters are stopped cold. The movement toward the goal isn't just complicated, it's outright blocked. No progress whatsoever is made. No scene endings can be effective for shooting the stakes sky high. However, they should also be used with caution. Too many in a row means the plot can make no progress since characters never get any closer to the overall story goal. More than that, the absoluteness of no endings can make it difficult for characters to regroup or gather enough context to try again in a different way. No endings often bring the narrative screeching to a halt, and this is rarely a good plot device since it actually kills tension instead of building it. In essence, if a yes ending deflates conflict by giving the protagonist a win, the no ending kills the conflict by instead giving the antagonistic force the win. There aren't a lot of options for the protagonist after a solid no ending. One of the only times a hard no ending might be desirable is when you do, in fact, want to screech the plot to a halt for a bit, as would be the case if you wanted to return to deeply traumatized or disillusioned characters after a passage of time in order to watch as they pick themselves back up. For example, The Empire Strikes Back ends with a pivotal no when Luke Skywalker confronts Darth Vader in Cloud City. Luke's goal is clear: defeat Vader and save his friends. Not only does he fail to defeat Vader, he loses his hand and is hit with the devastating reveal that Vader is his father. Physically, emotionally, and psychologically, he is stopped cold. The story doesn't just complicate things, it shuts the door completely. He escapes only by falling into the void. And after that moment, the plot does screech to a halt for a time between episodes, which allows the necessary space for Luke to reflect, regroup, and build into a new approach in Return of the Jedi. Scene ending type number 3, yes, but, which is a small victory with complications. So one of the most useful scene endings is the yes, but outcome. This one mixes elements of victory and defeat to deepen the narrative. On the one hand, the characters' efforts achieve a yes. They get some or all of what they wanted in the scene. On the other hand, they are met with a but. Their gain comes with complications or consequences. This approach is particularly effective since it allows the plot to move steadily forward thanks to the characters' achievements of scene goals on the path toward the larger story resolution. It also ensures the plot can't end too quickly, thanks to the complications that prevent a clean victory. For instance, perhaps the characters get half of what they want, but that means they also don't get half of what they want. Or perhaps they get exactly what they sought in this scene, but doing so raises the stakes or gets them into trouble, which can then prompt a new goal in the next scene. From a pacing perspective, yes, but scene endings are great since they give audiences little hits of satisfaction as the characters receive yummy rewards, but it also ramps tension and keeps readers reading since these rewards complicate either the characters' lives or their forward progress toward the ultimate catharsis of the climactic moment. In truth, this type of scene ending is so useful and versatile, you could easily use it for every scene outcome all the way to the end. For example, the Fellowship of the Ring offers a great yes but during the Council of Elrond when Frodo volunteers to take the ring to Mordor. Although Frodo's goal in that moment isn't fully conscious, his intent is clear. He wants to do the right thing, stop the council's squabbling, and take responsibility for the burden he's been given. He succeeds when the council accepts his offer in a definitive yes. The complications, however, are enormous, as this decision definitively turns the plot by launching Frodo onto a long, dangerous road filled with escalating threats. Scene ending type number 4, no end, in which it gets worse. So what's the difference between a yes but and a no end scene ending? The no end scene ending is similar to the yes but ending, but flips the script. Here, instead of mostly succeeding, characters mostly fail. However, the failure is not complete. Out of the rubble of failure, scraps of insight or hope emerge. Some small bit of ground is gained. The no end scene ending is the classic cup half full. Everything's gone to pot, yet characters are still able to salvage some small win. They find a way through the mess or latch on to the bit of knowledge learned from their mistakes. Whatever the case, the most important thing to leverage about a no end ending is that it moves the plot. The only way it can do that is by changing something for the characters. So even though they may have spectacularly failed to gain what they wanted, they now have some tool or clue that allows them to try again, but in a different way. No end endings can't be used as exclusively as yes but endings unless your story leads to your character's ultimate failure. But they can be used liberally, especially in the second act, to increase tension, raise the stakes, and create interesting dynamics for prompting characters to evolve. For example, The Martian by Andy Weir features a great no-end scene ending when protagonist Mark Watney tries to make water to grow his crops and accidentally blows himself up. His goal was simple: create a livable environment using chemistry and ingenuity. The scene ends in failure. However, in the aftermath, he figures out what went wrong, recalibrates his approach, and gains critical information about how to proceed more safely next time. N scene ending type number 5, no but, in which we find the danger of false progress. So this is the trickiest one. In a no but ending, characters fail to get what they want, but walk away with something that seems helpful until it turns out it's not. No but creates the illusion of movement without true momentum. As a plot device, this is never particularly useful since it never actually moves the plot, no matter how much it may look like it does. It creates dead ends in which characters spend time working on a seeming solution only to end up exactly where they started back before the original no but scene. And the result can be a busy plot that actually goes nowhere. The no but outcome may be used very occasionally with purposeful effect to emphasize a character's current refusal to learn and or to face consequences or personal blind spots. It can also be used to deepen tension and despair in certain situations in which a character is clinging to false hope, such as in disaster stories in which characters think they have found a way out of their peril, only to realize it was a mirage. Used sparingly, this kind of scene can underscore a character's stuckness or false sense of growth. For example, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade features a solid no-but scene early on when Indy fails to recover the Cross of Coronado from the treasure hunter who stole it. He's given a token win when the local authorities thank him and the museum director tells him, "At least you tried." However, although it may feel like he's accomplished something or at least clarified his purpose, the artifact is still gone and he's no closer to recovering it than he was before. So this isn't progress. The but gives the illusion of development, but the narrative is effectively paused until the real plot kicks in with the Grail storyline. As with most writing techniques, the power of scene endings lies not simply in recognizing the options, but in knowing how and when to use them. The way you close a scene determines how your story moves forward. And this is true whether you're building tension, paying off a moment of catharsis, or giving your characters one more reason to grit their teeth and keep going. So if your scene endings feel flat, confusing, or disconnected, chances are your plot is suffering too. However, when you choose your outcomes with intention, by aligning them with character goals, story structure, and pacing, you can create a reading experience that feels cohesive and alive with momentum. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. If you're ready to take a deep dive into the mechanics of scene structure, including how to seamlessly integrate your scene and sequel halves, you can check out my book, Structuring Your Novel. Not only will it teach you how to structure a solid plot, it's packed with practical tools and intuitive frameworks to help you build scenes that keep readers reading. It's available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. You can find links on my site or on major retailers like Amazon. And I hope you'll stop by the site and tell me your opinions. Which of these 5 scene endings do you find yourself using most often? Are there any you tend to avoid? And if you'd like to read a transcript of this episode, you can find that on my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Helping Writers Become Authors. I hope you'll stop by the site for a full transcript of this episode and to join in the conversation in the comments. Tune in for next week's episode, where we'll continue to explore all things writing and storytelling. If you'd like to support the podcast, it always means a ton when you take a moment to leave a quick rating or review on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, or Spotify. To stay updated on all the latest content I create for you, the best way is to join my mailing list at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com/mailing list. You'll also immediately gain access to lots of free resources, including my books, Crafting Unforgettable Characters and 5 Secrets of Story Structure. For real-time connection with me, more writing advice, and behind-the-scenes glimpses, follow me on Instagram at authorkmwyland. A heartfelt thank you to each one of you for your support and enthusiasm, and especially those of you who support my work on patreon.com/kmwyland. You help make my site, this podcast, and so many other resources available to writers everywhere. So until next week, keep writing, keep dreaming, and most importantly, keep being true to your stories. Thank you for being part of Helping Writers Become Authors.